Hey guys, Matt here, and today I want to bring you guys a video on what I consider to be probably one of the best builds that have ever graced the world of Raid class. This is an aura stacker, obviously, but it is a spark aura stacker, which I guess is also obvious given my last videos. But in this video, I'll be showcasing the build, what it's capable of. I'm not going to be showcasing a map or some T16 Guardian because I actually kill T16 Guardian with a single spark. I just have to hit the Guardians twice with one of my spark, and they last for just about 6 seconds. So it is not necessary to show that kind of content. I could do a T19 100% Lyris maps, but unfortunately that is also kind of irrelevant content for this build because Kosis dies in roughly 1 second, maybe even less, because this build does upwards of 300 million damage per second, given that you're hitting the enemy with each and every one of your projectiles. So the only real content that this build is actually good to be showcased on is deep delving. Now, there are not many builds in this game that have ever reached 6,000 depth. The amount of builds that can reach 6,000 depth you can pretty much count on your fingers, on the tip of your fingers, because there's just such a small amount. This build can actually very easily clear 6,000 depth delving and also everything else in the game. The only thing I probably wouldn't recommend on this build is Uber Lab, due to the fact that we have no ES regeneration or life regeneration, due to the fact that we are using Skyforce. This is probably the only thing that I think is a little bit bad about this build, is the fact that we are using Skyforce, therefore we have no life regeneration, which allows us to not run Zealous Oath, and that's a little bit annoying, but what can you do? It's pretty much the only way to actually fit in double Nebulous on this build, because the amount of auras that we run, due to the fact that we cannot use blood magic because we are a CI, Chaos Inoculation, and also low life through the usage of a Coward's Legacy. This is also just a mechanic for deep delving. As you can see, I have a leather belt, a headhunter in my inventory. This headhunter is for mapping, so whenever I'm not delving, I throw on a headhunter, because who needs 300 million damage for mapping? You could simply 300 million Cyrus DPS, sorry. You could just use a headhunter instead. So this is obviously not a build for this is not an entry-level build. This is a very, 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 very expensive build that I've been working on for, multiple weeks at this point. So I'm finally at the point where I can say, okay, this is it. This is the build. I can finally showcase it. I'm happy with it. I'm finally, there's not much left to upgrade on the build. There are a few different things that I can upgrade on this build, and I'll go over in the POB section of the video. But otherwise, realistically, this is about 90% as good as it's going to get. There is an extra 10 or so percent that you can get, maybe even 20%. If you really, really go hard, you can probably get an extra 30% damage on this build. But those kind of upgrades would require an incredible amount of currency. So, as I'll show in the POB section of the video, it'd be nuts. But again, the only thing that is challenging for this build is deep delving. Now, if you've ever deep delved or ever seen anybody deep delving is a one-shot fest. It's a kill or be killed kind of situation. It doesn't matter if you have 90 all resistance, if you have 95% chance to dodge, if you have 90% physical damage reduction, if you have 50,000 energy shield, anything that hit you will kill you in a single hit. And that is just the reality of delving. So because of that, I will be showing you guys the delving setup. Now, there's basically one little thing that changes on this build, and that is the use of a single gem. In maps, we use Purity of Fire. That gives us a 90 fire resistance and makes us basically almost immune to all elemental damage. In Delve, we use the Dread Banner. That gives us 95% chance to evade hits from monsters, which can very, very often save you from auto attacks or a monster just jumping on top of you, or things like that. It won't save you from any type of spells, any type of projectiles or whatever, but it will save you from those pesky close range enemies which can get sometimes close to you in biomes that have, for example, monsters cannot be slowed below base value and stuff like that. Now, the build value here is, at this point, it's over 15 mirrors is what my build is currently worth. So again, this is a very, very advanced and high-end build, but you could retract probably, I want to say, 80% of the price of the build and still have a fairly similar build capable of doing just about the same content, probably capable of 6K delving. Because a lot of the things that I have on this build are either quality of life or just overall min-maxing. For example, an Exploding Nebulous is completely useless outside of, you know, very, very juiced Delirious map. Otherwise, it does nothing for me. Even in Delve, it does nothing for me because monsters don't have, they have a ton of of damage reduction, so the explosion doesn't even do anything. You know, for example, 1-stat Voices, which I have 2 of, going to be a 3rd one very soon. Not either something you could easily run 3 3s or even 3 5s. That being said, note that the more you remove from the build in terms of budget, the less it's going to be able to perform. And this is a build that is, again, very, very high end. So, you know, you could see this as something that you could work towards for your entire league, or if you have a ton of currency, you don't know what to do with it, this is probably one of the best build I've ever, well, this is the best build I've ever played, but probably one of the best build I've ever seen. I've never seen a build capable of doing 6K depth delving and also capable of doing 100% Delirious map and literally everything else outside of immortal builds, but those tend to have very low damage and very bad clear speed. So other than the fact that they're immortal, they kind of suck. This build is good at literally everything outside of, again, Uber Lab, because if you get clipped by a trap, you know, your Skyforce are going to make it pretty hard for you. So before anything else, before further ado, let's go ahead and jump into, you know, let's do this. So let's do a 4050 depth Grand Architect, which is a Delve boss. So looks like the mods on it are not too bad. There is Bloodline, which is a bit annoying. There's Power Charge on hit, but that's whatever. There's no tanky mods or nothing crazy like attacking gas speed, so it shouldn't be too big of a problem. Now, again, this is a one-shot fest, so if anything hits me, I will die, and this is something you need to get used to when delving. That is just the reality of the delving lifestyle. It is kill or be killed, hit or be hit. So we are going to walk up to him. We're going to smite him whenever he's, you know, hittable. Popper Flask, smite him again. And there we go. He's officially phased. Now, this, again, is a 4,000 depth Delve boss. So this guy has hundreds of millions of health or something like that. He is probably like 15 to 20 times tankier than Cyrus. Now, these are just estimations due to the fact that I'm looking at the time that it takes to actually damage him versus the time that it takes to kill Cyrus, because I kill Cyrus in basically 1 second, especially if I put in Hyperthermia, because this is with Fork. Now, the screen is filled with tons and tons of projectiles. That is because we have a lot of cast speed, and on top of a lot of cast speed, oh, I think I threw these too early. Doesn't really matter though. On top of a lot of cast speed, we have a lot of duration. Our sparks last over 6 seconds, or sorry, around 6 seconds. It looks like I'm out of flares, so this is kind of a yikes. But this is our burst DPS. As you can see, 4,000 depth. Boss is literally a matter of a few seconds to kill. So this build does ridiculous damage. And let me just showcase you what the Delve lifestyle is. Well, I guess I got killed by darkness and not by an actual monster. But what can you do? Now, again, if you haven't seen my video from yesterday, how to turn on all those 15 auras like I just did, you can check that out. So without further ado, let's just jump into the POB. First off, we are going to go to my current build, and then I'll show you guys the endgame build if you were to min-max literally everything. So the damage that you're seeing right now on your screen is 312 million DPS. Now, to be fair, and to be completely honest, this is not your actual DPS, because this is your burst DPS. This is when you pop in Val Haste, and this is when you pop in Val Righteous Fire. This is also when you have all charges, Power, Frenzy, and Endurance charges, which you do have through generation of killing enemies, so not something that you would have against Cyrus. And this is also on Consecrated Ground, which is not a problem because we run Zealotry and a Bottled Faith. This is with Avian's Might active, though, which does give us double damage. So if we remove that, which is 50% of the time, our damage is 267 million. The other 50% of the time, it's 312. And this is ignited and chilled, which is obviously at all times because all our damage is cold, and we run anger, so we have fire damage as well. And this is our Cyrus DPS. Now, if you were to look at our actual DPS against Cyrus, so if I walk up to Cyrus right now, I would not have Val Haste. I would also not have Val RF, which is right here. But I would actually remove Fork and use Hypothermia. Hypothermia has a lot more single target damage. The next thing that I would do, though, is I would not have Power Charges or Frenzy or Endurance Charges. I would have Inspiration, Onslaught, and Consecrated Ground. And, you know, the other stuff. But just for the sake of this, we are going to remove our aspect of the Avian because it is only up 50% of the time. So 50% of the time, if I walk up to Cyrus right now with my current Flask setup with an Adziri's Promise, because we run Adziri's against Cyrus, there's no reason to run a Quicksilver against Cyrus. Then, if I walk up to Cyrus right now, I hit him for 151 million damage, 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, I hit him for 176 million damage. And Cyrus has something like 80 million HP. So we actually kill 2 Cyrus in 1 second, hypothetically, theoretically. That being said, that's not how this works because Spark fires in a Nova due to the fact that we run the Hazardous Research Gem. So because it fires in a Nova, obviously we are not going to hit Cyrus with every single one of our projectiles, so the actual damage is going to be a lot lower. It's going to be about half as much, which is why we kill Cyrus in about 1 second. About 1 second if we set up everything, but there seems to be some type of damage reduction phase at the very beginning of Cyrus's phases. So for a second he takes like no damage and then he instantly dies, which is kind of weird. But that's our damage with my current setup. Now, because this is a very high-end setup, I'm just going to paste the paste bin and let you guys, you know, deal with it. Because if you're newer to the game, you're probably not going to be able to afford this. And if, you know, if you don't have an insane amount of currency, this is not a build for you. So this is more for advanced players. And this is not the type of video that I'm a big fan of making. I typically make more entry or medium level stuff. But I figured a lot of people were asking, how the hell do you do that much damage? How the hell can you destroy depth 6k delving better than most Icicle miners can with the Replica Nebulous? Well, this is how. So, 176 million. Now, just for the sake of this, I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys what the build looks like if you were to truly min-max it. So if you were to actually truly min-max, most of these items are actually mine. The only difference is that there is an additional +2 projectile, while my Cycle Walls has a +2 duration, so an extra +2. This would cost you about 4 to 5 mirrors, so very expensive for the +4, and they don't even exist. I looked. The next is I put in some +7 High of a Templar with Elemental Weakness, which is absolutely unreasonable. You would not be able to get those, probably not even in Standard. +7 without Elemental Weakness is possible. +6 with Elemental Weakness is also possible. Those pair of gloves go for about a mirror or two, but getting just +6, such as the gloves that I have on right now, are worth about 100 to 150 exalts, so they're fairly affordable for how good they are. They are not significantly, significantly worse than these. They're about, 8 to 10% less damage, The Skyforce are also mine. The Amulet is one of the biggest upgrade, and this is something I'm waiting for the guy to log in to buy this. Please don't buy this before I do. This Amulet is absolutely necessary for this version of the build, because in this version of the build, we are actually switching from the right side of the tree to the left side of the tree, which allows us to get a Transcendent Flesh. Transcendent Flesh gives us, as you can see, 49% critical strike multiplier, so it is better than a triple, or it is just about the same, than a triple multi-jewel. So it's really nuts, and we are able to use this by going to the left side of the tree. That being said, the only way to do this is to have triple 1-stat voices and to drop the charge on kill. Now, we do not want to drop charge on kills because charges actually give us insane amounts of damage. If I go to the calculations right now and I remove the charges, you'll see that our damage drops fairly significantly, about 70 million less damage or so, right? So it is a big deal to have charges on the build. Now, when you're looking at this levels of damage, to be completely honest, it's not necessary to get those charges. But since we're min-maxing, getting the charge on the amulet is the only other way to get it, to be able to actually access this additional jewel socket on the build, which is kind of nuts. So I've been waiting for a clarity, mana reserved, and charge amulet to pop up, and finally one actually popped up. But the guy's offline, 125x for that is a pretty good price. Next, we are using Wrath and Hatred on the rings, nothing crazy. Coward's Legacy is mandatory. And this is our flask setup. This is actually not our highest DPS flask setup. If we wanted to push as much damage as possible, we could actually use an Adziri's Promise instead of the Quicksilver, and that would give us 423 million damage. And another thing that we could do is actually go with the single target setup, which actually has Hypothermia. If we drop in Fork and pop in a 20 Hypothermia, you could even go with a Divergent Hypothermia. You will see that, well, we have over 500 million damage, which is absolutely insane. Now, to be completely fair, though, I probably won't be able to either afford or even purchase some of these items, such as the Hands of the High Templar or a +2 Sacral Walls myself, because the amount of grinding required to do so is just way too much. But the damage without those, without the Sacral Walls being +4 and the Hands of the High Templar, everything else being the same, our damage only drops by about 50 million, so we're still doing nearly 500 million damage on this build, and it has nearly 7,500 energy shield, which means outside of Delve, it is a very, very tanky build. If we go to our calculations, you'll see that in the calculations, we have an effective health pool of about 60,000. Now, this is due to the fact that we do not have any regen, but our actual effective maximum hit taken is 46,000, meaning any hits in the game less than 46,000 damage will not kill us in one hit. And that is just about every single hit in the game, meaning we are pretty much immortal outside of Delve, which is very, very nice. Now, if you wanted to push the damage to absolutely insane numbers, especially for delving, this is with the Guardian Ascendancy, which is completely useless in Delve, so we would actually go Inquisitor, and then we are pushing the 600 million damage, which is the amount of damage that perfectly, that basically perfect builds that our Icicle Miners are currently doing in Delve right now. So we are actually on par with builds that are basically spec'd into just damage, negative on 100 resistance, and 300 ES. So clearly this is a superior build. This is probably, again, like I've said, the best build I've ever seen in the history of Path of Exile, especially when min-maxed to this level. On that note, though, that's going to be it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Before I go, though, I want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Mario, Luro, Gaikona, Kfish, Dr. Radu, Scott, Zarashi, Kevin, Cassius, Brandon, and Dan S. And of course, anybody else who has supported me in the past and anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous. Now, if you want to see this build in action, feel free to stop by my stream, because this is the build that I'm currently running. Not the 600 million damage version, but the 300 million damage version. But I'm working my way towards the 600 million damage version, and we just might be able to make it before the end of the league. Especially due to the fact that the league was extended by a whole month. So, on that note, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.